Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge or, in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara Riska, life coach, wife, and the mother of 4 incredible and unique kids. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I completely lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and grace that once felt so completely lacking. I started the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves up against what feels impossible. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle the dreams that you hold impossible now. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you're a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome back to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Please excuse my voice. I got myself a little summer cold. And, some of you might relate to after you haven't been sick for like a year and a half, you'd forget how horrible it is. It's been a little bit of a rough week, but I'm coming back. And so I'm glad to be on this side of it. Let's just say that. I have a really special episode in store for you. And before I get to the details of the episode, I want to make the official announcement for the Own Your Story workshop that I have coming up. It's going to be July 31st, 9 o'clock Pacific time. So it is still available for my Eastern people. 9 o'clock Pacific time for 3 hours, 9 to noon. And I'm bringing in a specialist for this workshop. Her name is Katie Caseta. And I actually discovered her because I went to a workshop very similar and it was life-changing. As I am approaching the year anniversary of this show, this idea sparked in my mind about how cool would it be to not only gather women together, actually in community, face to face, and to teach them how to tell their story in a way that leaves them feeling more capable, more empowered, more excited. Because I think a lot of us think, okay, it's just your story. It's just like what is, like what's there to do? And so, interestingly enough, this workshop is going to help you discover the transformational power of rewriting your narrative as a special needs mom. And it's not all going to be focused on being a special needs mom. We all know that that's only part of your story. But the fun thing is at this workshop, you're going to kind of figure out how that fits into your story. And not just for the past, but more so for the future. I'm really excited, and I'm throwing in all sorts of perks. The link to sign up is in the show notes. And I do expect this workshop to fill up, so don't delay. As an incentive to sign up before July 16th, I'm offering a one-on-one coaching session with me. Right? That's amazing. Okay? I mean, not to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so amazing. That sounds a little bit awkward. But as you can see, as we'll transition into the introduction of this show, it actually is a coaching session. So Kayla is our guest, and I'm intentionally leaving off her last names so that she can remain semi-anonymous. She has agreed to share this coaching session that she and I had together with all of you. Actually, initially she came to me and said, hey, how about some more single moms on the show? And I said, hey, that's a brilliant idea. And so she was going to come on, and through a series of conversations, she's like, oh my gosh, things are so hard right now, and I don't think it's a good time. And my heart was just like, hey, let's have a session about this. And like, oh my gosh, what if we recorded it for the podcast? And so I just really want to shout out all the praises to her for her willingness to have this conversation in front of everybody. I don't think I would have done that, to be quite honest. So she's much braver than I am. And you'll see she is having, I think, conversations in her head very much like all of us. And I feel like any one of us that feels like we're stuck or kind of up against something that we don't like, but we also don't feel like we can change it, you're going to relate to her significantly. And so this episode is going to be different. I've intentionally left in some of the long pauses and not really edited at all so that, I don't know, I just felt like it would take away if it was kind of all polished up. And you're going to notice I say and a lot. So those I left in there. Maybe I shouldn't tell you that. Now you'll notice it. Shoot. Just kidding. Okay. Anyhow, you're going to notice long pauses. You're going to notice humans speaking, not perfectly. But you're also going to notice the thinking that's happening as Kayla is entertaining new thoughts and new ideas and considering what's possible for her. I think you're really going to enjoy it. It's something I'm considering doing much more frequently. And so let's get right into the episode. Kayla, thank you for coming to the podcast. And thank you first, actually, for approaching me via, I think it was Instagram. I can't remember exactly, but kind of just saying, hey, like, let's give some representation to the single mom. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So today we have a really unique kind of episode. And so in a minute, I'm going to transition from podcast host to coach. And Kayla and I decided that instead of talking about being a single mom, we were actually going to look together at some of the challenges, the current real life challenges that she's having as a single mom, co-parenting with her ex-husband as she's a special needs mom. Any thoughts or questions that you want to put in prior to us jumping in?
I guess the only thing I can think of is just a little bit of background. So me and my ex have been divorced officially for 4 years. We separated when my daughter was about 10 months old. So we've been on this journey for quite a while. We both have our own significant others as well. So it's a really interesting and unique situation, but I also know that, people deal with this all the time. So it's something that I wanted to kind of help share my story as well.
Yeah, definitely. And statistically, I thought I was thinking this morning, I should pull up the numbers, but I didn't. There's a lot of single moms out there, right? And because we know statistically there's a lot, and then we also know there's many children with special needs. So, we don't have to do the exact math to know that you're not an anomaly. There's
right.
A lot of people parenting a child with special needs with somebody that they're not married to or not living with, and maybe even don't even like. And we'll get into the specifics for you. And because we haven't coached together, I always like to kind of lay a little bit of a foundation so that you can understand kind of how it works. And then for the listeners, you can know that Kayla has the ability to decide whether she wants this aired. And so she's completely safe and completely authorizing this conversation to be aired. And but what I do like to put in there normally, what I say is, hey, this is a completely confidential conversation and that this won't be go beyond, like, you could be assured. But I guess what I want to assure you that as far as who I am in this space is a safe place to have open and honest conversations, and that I will ask questions that maybe your friends or family don't ask because I'm not your friend, even though I like you.
Right.
But we're not meeting together as friends. We've decided to meet as coach and coachee. And so therefore, it might feel a little bit different. It might feel different to have somebody that, one, you don't really know, ask you such personal, intimate, and maybe even like provoking questions. And so just know that you have the authority to answer in any way that you want. If you're like, not going there, like, we're just not doing that, that's your call. I will take your lead on what you want, where you want to go in this conversation. Any questions about that?
Okay. So do I have any questions? No, I don't have any questions before we start.
Awesome.
We'll just see how it goes.
We will. And then the other thing I'd like to put in there is that a lot of people have the misconception that a coach is somebody that's going to tell them what to do or give advice. And I know that was the number one misconception I had prior to getting into my profession. And so I like to put in here that a coach is distinctly different than a therapist, in the sense that a therapist is traditionally going to be looking at the past and healing the past, obviously, with very wonderful intentions and effective tools. And by all means, everyone knows I love therapy. The difference between a coach and a therapist, as a coach, I'm really looking at where you're at now and where you want to go. Yes, it matters what's happened in the past, but only as it relates to how you're thinking about it now. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But also, I like to distinguish against being an educator or consultant. Yes, on the podcast, I do some education. However, in the coaching conversation, my role is not as the expert or the authority or somebody that knows more than you do. I relate to you as somebody that has the knowledge of what's happening. And it's really just my job to offer reflections and help create awareness so that you can then essentially make better decisions because you know more about what's kind of running the inner conversation that you're having. So any questions about kind of distinguishing the different kind of hats some people wear, coaching, therapy, or?
No, not really. I mean, I also love therapy. I go to therapy as I can as a special needs mom. That's not always the easiest thing to fit into your schedule. But no, and that sounds like more of like what I'm trying to figure out with my life currently is, how, not necessarily like how to get over the past, but how to not necessarily use the past as the way I'm going to behave in the future, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense. And of course, I'm very intrigued and want to dive in there. But before we do, I want to just actually see what do you want to get coaching on today? What's coming up in your mind as it's kind of what's feeling like it's hard or stuck or not working?
So my ex has a particular pattern that me and my husband have kind of figured out. And he goes through phases where he's really good, and then we get the bad, and then we get the worst, and then we get the worst. And it's just this pattern. And like when he's not in a good place, or what we feel is a good place, he's not making doctor's appointments. He's not letting us know that he's coming. In our relationship with myself and my ex, we both go to every doctor's appointment because we have split households. And I made that decision a few years ago that I'm done being the only person that has to communicate all of her needs or all of her things going on. And that since we don't live in the same household, you need to be there. And he has his excuses all the time. He put the wrong time in, or he had another appointment come up. And then it just triggers me to get really, really angry. And then I go through a phase where I'm like, okay, well, that's it. On the days that I'm bringing her to appointments, I'm just going to bring my own people and you can just stay home. And then I get back into that pattern of, why am I having to tell you everything? And so it's just this, it seems like it's this vicious cycle for us that we enter into. And I know I can't change his patterns of behavior because that's on him and he has to work on that himself. But for me, I need to find a way to create a balance and figure out how to continue doing this for the next, forever, but at the very least until she's 18 and we can figure out what to do from there. So that would be another 13 years for us. So.
Okay, awesome. When you say figure out a balance, what does that mean to you?
For me, it means just not getting so triggered by his decisions, and trying to figure out how to also integrate better patterns for myself for reacting to him and the things he has, and to better organize like how we're going to deal with this as a constant problem, because it just goes in waves. The COVID pandemic has really put a damper on this, because for my daughter, she's only allowed 2 parents or 2 people in an appointment. And previously, when we have been in these positions, my mom or dad has always just come with me. But at this point, I don't want to make them take the drive with me an hour and a half to her appointment and then sit in the car during the appointment if he decides to show up, and then turn around and come home. They would do it. It's just, it's not nice to I feel like, in my opinion, to just be like, hey, you can come with me, but I can't tell you that you're going to be sitting in an air conditioned room or if you're going to be sitting out in the car during the appointment. So. Okay.
So we could dive into that a little bit, but I'm going to leave that there for now, because there's something that you said a little bit earlier that I want to explore a little bit. So you said, I'm done being the only one. And it was in the context that you were explaining to me kind of why it became the plan that you guys would both attend every appointment. So tell me a little bit about you deciding that you're done being the only one.
So my daughter has many complex medical health needs. And so I used to go to an appointment, and this is back when really it was me and one of my parents going to appointments pretty much on our own. And then I would have to call her dad to tell him how the appointment was. And my issue wasn't necessarily that I had to tell him. It was that he wasn't initiating the question. It was never a, hey, how did the appointment go? Or, thanks for going. Do you, what do I need to know? He doesn't ever ask questions about what's going on with her medical life. And so I decided that that in itself triggers me. And so my best way to remove that.
Pause for a second on that. So you said it triggers you when you think, or when you're what's the trigger? What's the feeling that happens for you?
It's I want to say anger, but I know that that's not exactly it. Feeling like he doesn't care enough is what it makes me feel.
Okay.
Whether or not that's true, because I'm sure it's not.
Well, let's actually just hone in on so it's probably like a subset, a flavor of anger. I don't know.
Right.
But let's actually get really clear on what that feeling is for you, what the trigger, like, so I think the trigger can mean a lot of different things. I think what I'm hearing is that when you have a thought, I don't know if you're aware of it,
Yep.
but you said it, he doesn't ever ask questions. And I don't know if you're aware that your actual thought, he doesn't ever ask questions and he should.
Right.
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 And that this is the belief that is creating what you're calling a trigger. And so sometimes it's really helpful to identify, well, what is it creating for you? And let's find a word for that. And maybe we can let it be anger. It doesn't have to not be anger, but you kind of said, it's not exactly anger. So let's see if we can actually find the best word that you can come up with right now for what the feeling is that you're experiencing.
Disappointment.
Got it. Okay.
I think would be the best word.
And when go ahead.
I was just going to say, because, I have a standard that I guess hold myself to, that I also know is a problem, that I hold other people to my standard of, this is what I feel you should be doing.
Yeah, I definitely hear that. And so when you feel disappointed, what do you notice about yourself? What might you do or not do?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I guess when I'm disappointed, I just when it comes to my ex, I shut down from him completely. My responses to him are very quick and definitely an undertone of anger. And as for me personally, I just get so frustrated that I feel like, I'm doing this all by myself. And I know that plenty of, special needs moms, especially, whether or not you're with a partner, feel like you're doing it by yourself anyways. So I know that that's common, but to me, it really, it brings me back to some of the reasons that we are not together anymore and that we did get divorced. And so it goes back into, all of that, all of our past history as well.
And why is that a problem?
Because it's not current. I don't know. That's how I feel. It's not what happened in the past and why we split up. I mean, it had some stuff to do with my daughter. But it was really just a base problem of him and myself. But the fact that we're 5 years later still dealing with the same thing, obviously proves that we never actually worked on the issues that we needed to work on, which is now creating a problem with co-parenting.
And how would you describe those issues?
How would I describe those issues? What do you mean?
What do you mean?
So just the issues of I don't want to get too much into our past, but some of the issues of laziness.
Yours
I
or
was
his?
working his.
Okay.
I was working, he was at home, and our daughter was in daycare. Can you please explain this to me? Things like that. So when we separated and I decided, hey, you have to do this now, I need you to step up in this area, and he still is not meeting that. It just brings all of that back for me.
Yeah. So would it be a accurate summary to say that what didn't work in the past was he wasn't doing what you thought he should be doing?
Right.
That was the problem. And it sounds like that's still a problem.
Yep.
Interesting, right? Interesting right. How changing the status of your marriage didn't change the relationship, right?
Right.
And how how much where you're at currently, and there's no right or wrong answer to this, it's really just kind of understanding where you're at on a scale of 1 to 10. How much responsibility do you think that you have for how hard it is and what's not working right now in the relationship and how he's showing up or not showing up for your daughter?
I mean, I want to say 5 because I feel like everything's a 50-50. Is that truly how I feel? No. That's just what I feel. Yeah. You said there's no right or wrong answer, but that's how I feel it should be.
You want to feel that way.
I want to feel that way.
Got it. Yes.
But I don't. I feel like it's a 1 or a 2. I mean, we've had issues in the past of like, hey, don't call me to tell me of an appointment. Send me a text message. Okay, cool. I do that. I send you a screenshot of the appointment, where it's at, what the time is, all of that. That's in my calendar. And I send it to both you and your fiance. So you both get it. So maybe we can get on the same page. And I mean, I used to call him to remind him of appointments. I don't anymore because you should have put it in your calendar and that's on you if you didn't. But then I get into the cycle of, but you didn't show up. And so, it's causing me issues and yeah. But I also don't want to feel like his mom where I'm like constantly calling him to remind him of the things that he should be doing.
Yes. So what is stopping you from accepting the reality that your ex-husband, your daughter's father, doesn't want to go to the appointments and he doesn't want to partner with you on this?
Okay. That's a good question. Actually, so there's a few things. If you want to take care or have custody of my medically complex daughter, you need to know what's going on with her medically. And that is like huge. I don't know how you can take care of her if you don't understand what's going on. The other part of it is in our state, we have this amazing program where parents can be paid to be their kids' PCAs. And so I have actually formulated her plan in ways that make it that you need to be in attendance to doctor's appointments. You need to know her medical stuff that's going on, just like I would if I had hired my own PCA. Now, not that they'd necessarily have to go to the appointment, but they'd have to make sure that they understand and know what's going on medically with her. So I expect the same from myself and my husband as I would of our PCAs that we do hire. Not that it's necessarily on them to ask me, hey, how did this appointment go as a PCA? But I think those are the biggest barriers for me, is that if you're going to want to have, especially the biggest thing is the custody. If you want to have 50-50 custody of her and you want to be able to legally make decisions for her, then you need to be informed on how to make those decisions and how to care for her.
Yeah. So what's interesting is the question was, why are you not willing to accept that he doesn't want to do that?
That's why.
Well, yeah, you told me all the reasons why he should want to.
Okay.
Do you see that?
So, yeah, I do. So
it's like, I don't know. Let me give you an analogy that's not related. You're smiling. You're like, oh shit. No. It's kind of like the idea that like of somebody that wants to lose weight. They know they shouldn't eat and they know they should exercise and they don't. And if they accept reality, what the reality is, if they continue in that behavior, those choices, they want to be comfortable more than they want to lose weight. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing bad or good about that. That's just an observation. It's just looking at what's happening and breaking it down. Like, oh, interesting. Because our actions will always follow what they always flow from our feelings, and our feelings always come from our thoughts and beliefs. And so when we look at kind of these actions and then the results that we're creating, we have to kind of trickle back up the line. And so what are your thoughts about the reflection I just gave you about how I asked you why you're unwilling to accept it, and you told me why he should accept it, why he has to accept it?
I guess that's really interesting because I mean, in my head and what I've always thought is that those are the reasons I refuse to accept it, because you
Yeah.
you committed to this. You didn't have to have custody of her. You didn't have to take her. You didn't have to have any of these things. And, I guess, another thing for me is that like, I don't want to do all of the work when he gets to get the benefit of it, if that makes sense. That's why not? Because that's unfair, and I don't. It infuriates me that is generally the reality that we live in. And
well, here's what's interesting is that you're already doing it. Right? Like, so you're right. Trying, you're saying, I'm going to drag you along whether you like it or not. I'm going to kindly remind you of all the things that you're supposed to be doing, but you're not. I'm going to get real mad when you don't. And then I'm going to get even more mad when you get to reap the benefits of my work, but I'm going to still do it.
Right. Because I don't have a choice. When it comes to...
You don't have a choice in what?
Like the work that I do for my daughter. Yeah, I could, and I have started letting go of some things. He's taking on some things, some very minor things. But, when it comes to like making all the doctor's appointments or making sure that things are getting followed up on, if I don't do that, nobody else will.
How do you know?
How do I know? Because who else is going to do it? He doesn't even know who her doctors are half the time.
Because he has you.
Yeah. But
my guess is you would never, and I'm not saying you should. We're just playing with different ideas, right?
Right.
We're examining, right? So I'm not saying you should be like, okay, you got this, buddy. But what's interesting is it's almost like, I'll use another weird analogy, but like I can get so mad at my kids if they're not going to clean up the kitchen, and just like go clean the kitchen, be like so mad, throw the dishes around and be like, oh, so mad, right? You can just picture it, right?
Right.
Who hasn't done that? And I can be like, oh my gosh, if I don't do this, nobody will. But maybe my tolerance and my idea of how the kitchen should look is totally different from theirs, which it is. And that I never wait for them to hit their tolerance of how they think it should be, so that they actually do say, oh, I want to clean the kitchen. And so in my head, I think, oh my gosh, if I don't do it, nobody else will. Yet I didn't even give them an opportunity to try. Like it didn't cross my mind that there was another way to do it. Right. And I get that, like, I don't want the dirty kitchen and you don't want your daughter's health. Like it feels very serious because it's your daughter's health care.
Right.
But obviously it's not working how it's going. No. And so, yeah, you're like, no. And that's why the idea of like examining what's happening and seeing what we might want to like keep, what's working. There's probably a lot. But then saying, this is interesting. You've been operating under these concepts and these beliefs. He's not doing this and he should. I have to control him. If I don't do it, nobody else will. I think your thought about like, I'm alone, being the only one, is really interesting, because coming from a place of love and compassion, like I get it. Like it's not easy parenting the daughter that you have, and the load is big, right? There's a lot on anyone's shoulders. But from what you told me, you have a spouse, your ex-husband has a spouse, Your parents, it sounds like, are willing to go to appointments with you to the extent that they'll go sit in the car, but you won't let them. And so, but then you have the story, oh, I'm doing it alone. Doing it alone. In that story, you're constantly finding evidence for.
Right.
Because it's really that no one's doing it the way you want them to.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I've never necessarily let her dad take over any of the medical stuff. Only because, and it's really hard when him and his fiance have flat out told me, well, we don't understand a lot of this, so that's why we like you having to do it all. And I'm like, that's not my fault that I spent all of this time for the last 5 years looking up and researching and understanding all of this. But in the same sense, no, I have not let him do that either.
Why do you think?
That's an interesting question. I mean, my immediate thoughts go to things like, if we have an appointment, he's not interactive at it at all. He's not asking questions. He's not doing his own research. He's not showing me that he can necessarily handle it. Because there's times when we're in appointments and they'll be like, do you have any questions? And he's just like, nope, nothing. Or like they're trying to get a dialogue going and he's just like sitting there doing nothing. So that makes me feel like he doesn't. Now, again, this is not true, probably. It makes me feel like he's not caring. He's not doing the research he needs to be doing. So it's hard for me to let go control of this big medical piece of her life when I'm not seeing the effort that, I'm going to say it this way, the effort that I feel I should see.
Totally. Yeah. Thanks for noticing, right? Like the way that you're like, I really want to just say, like you're noticing that the weight that you're putting on it, or like you're noticing the expectation that you have and the way you're the lens at which you're looking says you should be doing it differently than you are. And then it sounds like from what we're looking at right now, that you're interpreting the way he's being, lack of questions, sitting there. And like, I love how you just impersonated the body. Kind of like just,
I know they can't see it, but it was perfect. I promise.
Yeah, it was, you nailed it. For those of you listening, she just kind of, slumped there like, it was great. Okay. And like, is you're interpreting this as he doesn't care or he doesn't want to know? And I guess the question I would have is like, what if that's completely not true? What if that's his way of caring?
And I know he cares about his daughter. Like that's never been a question for me. My biggest question, issue, concern, all of the above, is does he have the capability to understand her needs? And I mean, drastic worst case scenario, would he be able to handle it if I wasn't here? But he wouldn't be able to if I don't give him a chance to, which I know, but that's not the easiest thing to do because I'm a control freak. I will just admit it. I love control. My husband tells me it all the time. He's like, you need to stop. And I'm like, I know. So it's something that I'm definitely like working on, but letting him, I don't feel like we have the opportunity to let him try and fail.
What if it's more that you're unwilling to be with the consequences of letting go of control?
That's true as well.
And when I say the consequences, obviously I have no idea what would happen, but my guess is that you're going to have to feel some feelings that for you feel very unpleasant or maybe
Mm-hmm.
even threatening. And that what you're able to cover with control, with the experience that you think you have control, allows you to avoid those feelings.
Yeah. And I mean, you know, even looking back at my statement, yes, my daughter's medically complex, but if we end up seeing a doctor in 6 months rather than 3, is it going to be a big deal? No. Unless something, you know, happens. Generally, if something happens, we're in the hospital, so we'll see them anyways. But yeah, no, I mean, no, I don't want to deal with the consequences that could arise if, let's say, we let him take over her medical scheduling. Because I don't know what they are. Or what the outcome could be that wouldn't be good, if that makes sense.
Well, I get that you don't know what they are, but you've already decided that they're going to be bad.
Well, yeah, if he doesn't do what needs to be done, it won't be good.
If he doesn't do it the way that you think he should.
No, it's not even that. Like, I don't care how he schedules appointments. Let's just say that we let him schedule doctor's appointments. I don't care how he does it, as long as it's done in the times that it needs to be done per doctor's recommendations. My concern is that he wouldn't do that. And then I don't like those consequences of not keeping in touch with her doctors and not having her appointments scheduled regularly and that kind of stuff, because I don't, because we have it could be fine, and we didn't need to see them that often and it's okay, or it could lead to potentially her getting hospitalized again. And I mean, I don't necessarily want to deal with like how I would feel if that latter outcome of her ending up hospitalized because the doctor's appointments weren't made ends up happening. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So you said you don't want to say that for me again. You don't want to.
I don't want to deal with it will be flat out anger. If she like ends up in the hospital because we missed a doctor's appointment and things were awry and we didn't know ahead of time.
Yeah. So I guess that was the thing I wanted to kind of hone in on a little bit. Why don't you want to deal with your emotions?
Because it will not be, because I don't feel like it would be dealt with in a healthy manner. And we already have had medical, okay, and this might also explain a little bit. We've already had medical issues where he hasn't followed through or done what he's supposed to do, and it's caused major problems for my daughter. So that might also help you and the listeners kind of understand why I'm so controlling over this medical piece.
Well, I have a question. So is that an absolute fact? Like, if I called his doctors and said, is the reason that she had this health issue because he didn't make this appointment or whatever he didn't do right?
Because he didn't dose her emergency seizure medication correctly? Yes.
Okay. So is that a mistake that somebody else could have made?
Sure, if you didn't throw away the medication you were supposed to throw away 2 years ago, sure. If I've given, and again, a controlling sentence, but it's going to come out anyways. If you would have done what I told you to do when we got the new dose, you wouldn't have had this problem. Throw away the old medication. But
yeah, and so obviously, because we only have our one session here, there's so many beautiful things to look at. And here's, I guess I really want to what I want to put in this space is that here's my hunch, is that this is less about what he's doing or not doing, but more about with you as a mom of a child that has the needs that your daughter has, of having to be with the feelings and the emotions that come up when you parent her, in the sense of like, you are trying to control the experience. You're trying to control the external things. Like he's your like main one, right?
Right.
Because if you can effectively, this is how your brain's working. You can effectively control him, then you can prevent her from having an issue, and then prevent yourself from having to feel the impact of that issue, which is my guess would be devastating.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I think, and a lot of my concern when it comes to like the medical health of my daughter is her epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of her biggest struggles. And it's one that can result in death very, very quickly for her. And so, right. If I don't control at least that portion of her medical experience, or I don't feel like he's informed as well as he should be, it has been proven in the past, and it, not that past doesn't always dictate current behavior or future behavior. But I think because of those issues, I need him to do, or I feel like I need him to do the certain things to make sure that we don't have the same problems as we've had in the past.
Yeah. And I think it's your brain's way of trying to control an uncontrollable experience.
Right.
And that you feel like you have a better facility with controlling things like her appointments and the things that you feel like you actually do get to make a say on. And the only thing that you can't effectively control, besides the actual things happening with your daughter, is what he does or doesn't do. Right. And so the finger keeps going over that direction. And I guess I just really want to emphasize, like, touching this with so much compassion, because I know, I see it so clearly that like you are doing a beautiful job of compensating for the emotional experience that you have had and that you might be afraid of in the future. And so therefore you're doing the very best you can. And I'll say you're doing a phenomenal job, and that there's probably a lot of relief for you if your resistance to feeling some of those emotions opens up. And what it will relieve is the belief that you have to control everything. And that'll be really relieving, because ultimately we all know we can't control everything, especially with our children or with those darn exes. And so when you realize that you can stop trying to control the uncontrollable, it's what's your, like, what does that bring up for you?
I mean, it sounds relieving. I guess for me, like, I don't know what path to take to do that doesn't cause me more anxiety or stress, if that makes any sense. So like, okay, so like one thing that we've talked about, and I could just say, yes, mom or dad, you guys can come with us to our appointments and sit in the car if he decides to show up. But then that brings on a whole other feeling of like being a burden, or, so that's, I think, where my biggest struggle is like, that sounds like a really good idea. Let's do that. Let's stop trying to control him. But then how do you accept what that means? Does that make sense?
It does. And I think what it helps, I think it will help to say, is how we do one thing is how we do everything. Right now, your way of being with your emotions is trying to control everybody around you so that you don't have to feel something. And so your thought about being a burden, you're thinking that that might come from what somebody else thinks. So you're going to try to not ask them to do something so that you don't have to feel something. Does that make sense? Right? Okay. So it's a clever way of trying to control somebody else's feelings, which we can't do. It's actually impossible, in an attempt to control your own feelings. So it's just more control coming up. And so I'd say the pathway, this is great. I'm so glad you went here. The pathway is, you really don't have to change anything that you're doing necessarily. Like, we don't want to necessarily like take away all your supports and be like, okay, good. Now go live in this world completely vulnerable and out of control. Like, I mean, like you could, but I don't know that, like, I wouldn't want to do that.
Right.
And so I'd say that it starts with the question I asked you a little bit earlier of, to what degree do you believe that it's like you or him creating this? And I think he's like, I want to say it's 50-50, but it's really like one or two. That you're going to, like, your mind's going to be blown. I would say it's actually 100% you. And this is not blame. Like, just be really, really clear. It's not blame. It's not your fault. Again, reiterating, like, you're doing the best you can, and you're doing a phenomenal job of parenting this child. I can tell. Like, I don't even have to know the details. We all know this. Okay. Right. But really, it's like, we think, oh, it's 50-50. And like, you brought up the concept, well, it's not fair. And like, from that vantage point, you're always going to be disappointed in what he's doing or not doing, because you're, again, still trying to control him. So when you actually take your eyes off of him and what he's doing or not doing, and you put him on yourself, again, not from blame, but you decide that you're 100% responsible and in charge of how your experience is, your emotions, and you let go of his and your daughters and your parents, and you let them be responsible for theirs, then it dramatically shifts your experience. And you might be willing to do some things that you're not yet willing to do.
I mean, sorry, I'm just trying to think.
Take all the time you need.
So, like, I understand that, like, I'm responsible only for me. And I guess, and I'm sure other people, deal with this too, especially when it comes to like a split custody situation. I think things get really murky in our own heads. Because, if, and I'll just say this. We've talked to lawyers multiple times about modifying custody, and they're like, he just needs to keep proving, or you just need to keep the proof, keep documenting. Eventually it'll be enough. And I'm like, when is eventually enough? And I don't necessarily want to let that happen either. Not saying that he would fail or, it would get to that point, but I also don't want to let that happen. And so, yes, I'm only responsible for me, and I need to work on really internalizing that statement. Even though I know it in my head, that doesn't mean that I actually understand that statement or can practice that statement. And allowing him to sink or swim on his own with some of the tools that, like, I can continue to do, like sending him appointments and, whatever that may be. I know it would help me in how I feel about things. I'm just it's hard to make that decision to let somebody potentially fail as well.
Yeah. And that might be further down the line than we even have to worry about right now.
Right.
But because it's like almost, it's interesting as it's like when you stop trying to control somebody, it's so freeing, but then you can't predict how they're going to respond. Right. And so it's obviously this conversation is not about him, but
Right.
like, you just don't know what you don't know at this point. And so the good news is we actually don't even have to worry about it. You can even keep doing exactly what you've been doing. But I guess, and this is going to be the practice as we kind of look to wrap up a little bit, the practice for you is really just to bring curiosity to your way of being. To when you notice that you're sending him that text of, hey, this is the appointment, be there, be square. You're not going to say that, but you're going to be thinking
Right.
it.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. And just notice your way of being. Just be curious. Why is it so important to me that he's there? And answer the question. Like, so you asked the question earlier, like, does he have the capacity to understand her needs? And don't let those questions just linger. Like, actually answer the question. We'll let you answer that on your own. But so the practice that I invite you to take on is bringing this curiosity to what's underneath your desire to control, and more specifically, what are the emotions, the feelings that you think you're going to have to feel if you let go of holding on so tightly? So again, you don't have to let go at this point. Like, I'm not saying that that's the next step,
Right.
but just bringing some curiosity to understand what's happening for you. And the reason why this is so critical is because this is where you actually have choice. This is where your responsibility comes in. Instead of looking at a situation and just pointing at him, you can actually take ownership that you are the one that generated the thought that caused you to be triggered, right? So we remember earlier we talked about like,
Yep.
you thought he should go to the appointment or he wasn't showing up and he should. So you felt triggered. Well, the interesting thing is the actual like simple fact of the matter is he didn't go to an appointment. For me, completely neutral. It doesn't matter to me if he goes or not. Like, I have no thoughts about that. Obviously, you have a thought about that. You have a very big thought about that, and it's causing you a lot of emotion. And so when you realize that that is your thought, he didn't cause that thought. All he did was not show up to an appointment. Then you can get curious about, why am I so attached to thinking about what he should be doing? What if and start asking yourself some questions like, what if I asked him what he wants to do versus telling him what he has to do? And so really, I think it's just bringing this curiosity, and especially around the concept of the 50-50 responsibility, and asking yourself a question like, what if I was 100% responsible for creating my experience in this relationship? I think that's going to be kind of the leading question. What if you're 100% responsible for creating your experience in this relationship? And that word experience is really critical because, again, you're not responsible for what he's doing. Like, you can't be. You're responsible for your experience. What is your thought on that?
I mean, I agree. Like, I am 100% responsible for my experience in split parenting. I guess, I think the things, especially for me too, that I have to explore is, um, like you were asking, like, what does he want to do versus telling him this is what he has to do. And you know, I guess how the other thing would be then to figure out how to make what he wants to do work for our situation, if that makes sense.
It does. And so before we go figure out how we're going to fix the problem, I want you just to allow it to not be fixed yet. Right. So we always want to go to how we're going to do something. And I really want you to stay in just the what you're creating. And that's the experience that you're creating. And so when you notice that you're going to the how, just touch yourself with compassion. Oh, I'm trying to figure out how, which is another. I think it's especially tempting for those of us that like control. Because if we figure out how, we feel probably safe, we have the path, we've got it, we have that security. And so again, the invitation is just to stay in the intentional vagueness of the how so that you can get clear on the what, because that what will inform you in who you need to be to create the how, right? Versus letting the how, because the how can be so limiting, because right now through the lens that you have, you're like, the only way to do it is that I have to demand that he shows up. I have to blank, 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 blank. And so that's what's informing you right now is the how. And so we actually want to back it on up, really get clear on who you are, who you want to be in the relationship, who you want to be for your daughter, what the experience you want, like this beautiful vision of like what you see possible. That's the what. And then we get to let that inform the how. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to wrap on up. Any other kind of thoughts or questions or any things that are kind of left hanging in your mind that you want to make sure we close out?
No, that doesn't sound very confident, but I mean, there's a lot going on in my mind. Yes. Is there anything that I don't think that like we've touched on? Not particularly, no.
Well, when I said, hey, well, what do you want? You kind of said, I want to kind of have better patterns for myself. You want some balance. And so where would you say, like, how far did you get in kind of getting what you wanted today?
I think it was extremely insightful as to like trying to look at things in a different light and a different perspective. I mean, no, I do not think that this is going to, and I'm not, crazy. I'm not going to say it's going to be, if it's going to be fixed as soon as, we're done. This is going to be a process for myself to go through. And, I think that, I've definitely learned some tools to try to implement when things happen, not as I feel they should. And to try to work at, if we can get to a point where we can actually sit down and have an actual conversation, because we're not at that point. Really, like you said, asking him, like, what does he really want out of this? What does he want to do? What are his goals and his thoughts and his ideas on what special needs parenting looks like for her? And then, figure out what his thoughts are on all of it.
And I'll just put this one last thing in. I just can't resist. It's like just the concept of being available to have that conversation would require you to actually listen to his answer, would require you to be unattached to how he does it. Because if you're listening through the lens of like, this is the right answer, he better tell me this answer, then you actually can't hear him. It blocks your hearing. And so do you see how like he just has to go be him over there? Like we're not asking him to change at this point, like, or even ever maybe, because, we know that doesn't usually happen. And so it really is like, you see how much opportunity that you have. And, yeah. So,
well, I think too, if once I can get to a point of actually hearing him and not judging him for his answers, because that's at this point what would happen. he would say whatever his answers are, and I would immediately judge him for his answers. So working on my reaction to even just him being a human is an issue, is something I need to work on before that. But, then we can, if I know what he's expecting of himself, it might help me understand what to expect from him as well. If he's not expecting the same things as I am from himself, then how is he going to do what I'm asking of him if he doesn't expect it of himself?
Brilliant insight. Oh my gosh, such a good reflection as you're processing this. And we're going to wrap up here. And of course, offline, I'll make sure you have the support you need to implement some of the awareness, and we'll of course stay in touch. And I just want to give you a quick acknowledgement I'm really blown away at your willingness to have this conversation be something that you're willing to share uncontrolled with the special needs community, right? Like it's a very, very high gradient of vulnerability. And I really want to honor that part of you that's willing to share. And I think it really shows who you are in your inner being of being unstoppable and loving and very courageous and like brilliant in who you are. I feel like I got to experience the power that you bring to everything that you do. And especially in regards to your daughter and the unstoppability that you have in making sure that she has the best. And so I really look forward to kind of hearing more about how this continues to go for you. And I think you see what's possible. My sense is that you see what's possible for your experience. And so I'll just close out for our listeners is like, oftentimes, and I don't know if you came into the conversation this way, we automatically assume something's not possible. And then we go and create it not being possible. But when we can step outside of our own existing thoughts, beliefs, circumstances that feel so hard, and we can see possibility, like we realize, oh, that exists, even if we only see it very far away, it completely changes how we show up for ourselves. And so to me, it's one of the best feelings ever when you connect to what's possible. And so I sense that you kind of see what's possible for you today. And so I'm really glad that you see that.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. I mean, we've done some things and we've tried some things to create better paths for all of us. And nothing's ever really stuck. And so I think that's where I was really excited when you approached this idea to me, because I'm like, I don't know what else to do. Like, I don't know how else to try to figure out how to make this a good experience for everybody. He may be off having his good old time and he's not affected by it.
He probably is. It sounds like he has
and
it pretty good.
Here and I'm sitting here with steam coming out of my ears. Like, why is this only me? I mean, and again, I don't know. We have talked. We don't get that deep into things anymore. But I really want to thank you for doing this. I was a little hesitant at first, in my head. I was like, well, let's see how this goes. I'll dip my toes in this, but no, I really think it was a good experience for me. And I just hope that, the other listeners can kind of come through this and apply it into their own lives as well.
Yeah. And then as we wrap up, I would say that to the people that listen to this, I invite you to see your story in Kayla's, to see where you might be operating some of the similar ways, to take on the same practices that she's taking on, to get curious with yourself. And this is the beauty of kind of the coaching conversation is, they're not altogether that much different. I could change the name and maybe change a few of the identifying details. And this conversation is not altogether unique. Of course, the being that you bring to it is uniquely you. And so I will wrap up there because I want to make sure I'm ready for my next client. But again, this is just such a privilege. And I think we're going to have to do this again on the podcast. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Wasn't that amazing? I know it was long. It was a longer episode. And so I hope you guys all stuck in with me. I want to make sure that all of the questions that you have in regards to the workshop are answered. And the link on the show notes will lead you to a page that has all the details, all the information. And of course, reach out to me if you have any questions. I'm easily accessible. And if you're new around here, you may not know that I have a group coaching program called Being Mom Together. And just like at the end of this episode, where we talk about when you see what's possible, even if it feels really far away, just the acknowledgement or even just the hope that there is something different available to us as we experience being special needs moms, gosh, that in itself brings so much relief and just feels so hopeful. And hope feels good. Hope is a beautiful thing. And so I invite you to check that out. It's also available via link on the show notes. You can also just schedule a consultation with me where I'll tell you all the details. And I cannot wait to see you in the next episode. Take care. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.